Hello everyone and welcome back to Shadow Man Stories. I can picture some of you already in bed, maybe some of you just getting home from work. Wherever you are, whatever time it is, I'm glad you're here. If this helps you relax or sleep, please like and subscribe. It means a lot. Now, let's get you comfortable, and I'll tell you tonight's story. My name is Samuel Blackwater, and I've been a forest ranger in the Daniel Boone National Forest for 20 years. Before that, I spent 15 years underground as a coal miner, just like my daddy and his daddy before him. Black lung disease ended my mining career at 32 years old. The doctor said I was lucky to get out when I did. My father and uncle weren't so lucky. They both died in mining accidents before I turned 18. I tell you this so you understand. I know mines, I know coal, and I know the stories miners tell each other in the dark. Stories about Tommy knockers. Little spirits that warn miners about cave-ins. Stories about the sounds you hear deep underground that can't be explained. I never believed any of it. I figured those stories were just how men dealt with working in constant fear of death. But that was before Black Mountain in August of 1985. Black Mountain sits at 4,145 feet, the highest point in all of Kentucky. The ridge is full of old mining shafts from the 20s through the 50s. Some of those shafts go down 800 feet or more. In 1958, there was a disaster at the main shaft. 23 men died when the supports failed and half the mountain came down on them. They never recovered all the bodies. These days, my job is making sure nobody else dies in those old mines. We seal the dangerous ones and monitor the rest for environmental damage. Acid drainage from the mines poisons the streams. Sinkholes open up where the tunnels collapse underground. Methane gas builds up in the sealed shafts. It's ugly work, but somebody has to do it. That August was brutal. The temperature hit 94 degrees most days, with humidity so thick you could drink the air. But up on Black Mountain, cold air poured out of the old mine entrances like breath from a grave. It meant the underground systems were bigger than we thought. The cold air had to come from where? Deep. The call came in on August 12th. A geological survey team from a gas company had gone into the main shaft 3 days earlier to check if the old mines were stable enough for gas extraction. They had permits, they had safety equipment, and they had an experienced foreman who knew what he was doing. They never came back out. The company waited 2 days before calling us, which made my blood boil. 2 days meant the trail was cold, the evidence was contaminated, and if those men were hurt, they might already be dead. But I swallowed my anger and got to work. My supervisor assigned Robert Coalfield to work with me. Bobby was 38, an expert in underground rescue and methane detection. We'd worked together before. He was good at his job and didn't talk too much, which I appreciated. We drove up to Black Mountain on the morning of the 14th. The dirt road was overgrown. Nobody had been up there in months, despite what the company claimed. Already, something felt wrong. "You noticed the quiet?" Bobby asked as we parked near the main shaft entrance. I had noticed. No birds singing, no insects buzzing, nothing. The forest should have been loud with life in August, but Black Mountain was silent as a cemetery. The mine entrance was a dark slash in the mountainside, reinforced with timber and concrete from the 50s. Our flashlights barely dented the darkness inside. That cold air kept flowing out, steady and wrong. "Temperature drop is significant," Bobby said, checking his instruments. "Got to be at least 40 degrees colder in there." We found the survey team's vehicle parked near the entrance. Inside were their lunches, still wrapped, their personal belongings, even their wallets. Nobody goes underground without identification. It's the first rule of mine safety. If something happens, they need to know who to notify. "They left everything," I said. "That's not right." Bobby was studying his methane detector, frowning. "Sam, look at this." The needle was jumping all over. High concentrations, then nothing, then high again. The pattern made no sense. "Detector must be broken," Bobby said. "Or something down there is very wrong," I replied. We geared up with respirators, rope, and emergency oxygen. Standard procedure. I've rescued men from mines before. You go slow, you stay alert, and you never take chances. The mountain doesn't forgive mistakes. The main shaft descended at a gentle angle, reinforced with old timber supports and rusty rails where coal cars used to run. Our lights showed the walls, solid rock streaked with coal seams, just like I remembered from my mining days. 50 feet in, we found the first thing that made my skin crawl. Fresh coal dust. Not old dust that had settled decades ago. Fresh dust, scattered across the ground like someone had been digging recently. I knelt down and rubbed it between my fingers. It was fine and pure, not mixed with the dirt and debris you'd expect in an abandoned mine. Bobby, when did they seal this shaft? Company records say 1961, he replied. Then explain this. I showed him the dust. He had no answer. We kept going deeper. The shaft branched into multiple tunnels about 200 feet down. According to the maps I'd studied, there should have been 3 main tunnels. But our lights revealed 6 distinct passages, all looking recently used. Maps must be wrong, Bobby muttered. But I'd seen the original mining company documents. Those maps were detailed and accurate. They had to be, or miners would get lost and die. These extra tunnels shouldn't exist. We called out for the survey team. Our voices echoed strangely, bouncing back in weird patterns that almost sounded like words. Almost, but not quite. Then we heard it. Tap, tap, tap. Rhythmic hammering, coming from deep in the mountain. The sound every miner knows. A pick striking rock. Someone was working down there. Survey team, Bobby shouted. Can you hear us? The hammering stopped. For 10 seconds, there was peat, effect silence. Then it started again, faster now, and from a different direction. We followed the sound down the leftmost tunnel. This passage was narrower, and the timber supports looked old and fragile. I tested each one before we passed, checking for rot. Everything seemed stable, but wrong. The wood should have been decayed after 30 years, but it felt solid under my hands. The tunnel opened into a large chamber, what miners call a room, where they dig out the coal. Our lights swept across it, and I stopped breathing. The room was huge, at least 50 feet across and 30 feet high. According to the maps, this chamber should have been maybe 15 feet wide. Someone had expanded it. And the coal face, the wall where miners cut into the seam, looked freshly worked. I could see pick marks in the stone. Clean cuts. Recent cuts. This is impossible, Bobby whispered. I walked closer to the coal face, studying the marks. They were precise and uniform, made by someone who knew exactly what they were doing. My daddy had taught me to swing a pick when I was 12. I knew good work when I saw it. That's when I found the equipment, modern equipment. A pneumatic drill, barely 5 years old, a battery-powered lamp, a hard hat with a fresh inspection sticker, all arranged neatly against the wall like someone had just finished their shift and would be back tomorrow. Bobby, come look at this. He examined the equipment, then checked his radiation detector. No radiation. Air quality is actually better here than outside. That shouldn't be possible with methane buildup. The hammering started again, very close now. It came from another tunnel leading out of the chamber. And this time, I heard something else under the hammering, singing, men's voices, rough and low, singing an old mining ballad my father used to sing. The words were about coal and darkness and the brotho. Hood of men underground. It was a song from the 30s, maybe older. Someone's playing a recording, Bobby said, but his voice shook. We both knew no one was playing a recording. I moved toward the tunnel where the singing came from. Bobby grabbed my arm. Sam, we should get back up. The ground shook. Not hard, but enough to make dust rain from the ceiling. Both of us froze, waiting to see if it would become a collapse. But it stopped after 3 seconds. Just settling, I said, though I didn't believe it. We entered the next tunnel. The singing got louder. Now I could make out words. Down in the dark where the coal seams run, we dig and die till the work is done. Brother to brother, till the morning light. We'll swing our picks through the endless night. The tunnel curved sharply, and we saw light ahead. Not flashlight. A warm yellow-orange glow like old carbide lamps. We came around the curve and stopped dead. 6 men stood in a line, swinging picks at a coal face in perfect rhythm. They wore old mining clothes, canvas pants, suspenders, cloth caps. Their picks rose and fell together, striking the coal in time with their song. They were absolutely real. Solid. I could see the sweat on their faces, the coal dust on their clothes, the muscles working in their arms. "Hey," Bobby shouted. "We're with Forest Rescue. We're looking for—" All 6 men stopped at exactly the same moment. 6 picks held frozen in mid-swing. 6 faces turned toward us, and I saw their eyes. No eyes, just darkness. Deep, empty darkness where eyes should be. I grabbed Bobby and yanked him backward. The men didn't move, just watched us with those empty sockets. One of them smiled, showing teeth like chips of coal. We ran. The tunnel seemed longer going back. Our lights bounced crazily off the walls. Behind us, I heard the picks start hammering again, faster and faster, the rhythm turning into something like laughter. We burst into the large chamber and Bobby screamed. 5 people stood there who hadn't been there before. The survey team, 4 men and 1 woman, all wearing their company jumpsuits and hard hats. They looked confused, but alive. "Thank God," Bobby gasped. "We need to evacuate immediately." "Evacuate?" The woman, her name tag said Morrison, looked puzzled. "We just got here. We're supposed to do a structural survey." "You've been missing for 3 days," I said. 3 days? One of the men laughed. "We came down this morning. It's been maybe an hour." I checked my watch. It was 2:47 p.m. We'd entered at 11:30 a.m. They'd been reported missing since August 11th, 3 days ago. "What's the date?" I demanded. "August 11th, Morrison said, like I was crazy. Bobby's methane detector started screaming. The needle pegged at maximum. But we were all breathing fine. No headaches, no dizziness, no signs of gas poisoning. From the tunnel behind us, the singing grew louder. More voices now. Dozens of voices. "We need to leave," I said. "Right now." But when I turned toward the exit tunnel, a man stood blocking it. He wore a foreman's gear from the 50s, a white hard hat, a clipboard, and a brass whistle on a chain. He was tall and broad, with a face like carved stone. His eyes weren't empty like the others. His eyes were full of coal dust, swirling and moving like smoke. "You boys lost?" he asked. His voice sounded like rocks grinding together. "Shift just started. We got quotas to meet." "We're leaving," I said, trying to sound calm. "Can't leave during shift," the foreman said. "Rules is rules. Men work their full time, or they don't get paid." He smiled. It was the worst thing I'd ever seen. "Besides," he continued, "we're always hiring. Good men are hard to find. Men who understand the work. Men who respect the coal." Bobby raised his radio, probably hoping to call for help, but when he pressed the transmit button, all that came out was static, and underneath the static, singing. The foreman's smile widened. "Welcome to Black Mountain Mine. I'm the coal singer, and you boys just signed on for the permanent shift. I've faced dangerous situations before. Cave-ins, gas pockets, equipment failures. You learn to stay calm, think through your options, and act decisively. But nothing in my 20 years of experience prepared me for a supernatural foreman blocking my only exit." "Bobby," I said quietly, "how much rope did we bring?" 200 feet. Not enough to rappel back up the main shaft, but maybe enough for what I was thinking. The coal singer watched us with those swirling coal dust eyes. Behind him, more figures emerged from the darkness. Dozens of miners, all with those empty eye sockets, all carrying picks and hammers and shovels. They filled the tunnel, blocking any escape that way. "Sam," Bobby whispered. "The survey team." I glanced back. Morrison and her crew were picking up tools from the floor, tools that definitely hadn't been there a minute ago. They moved like sleepwalkers, faces blank, heading toward one of the other tunnels where the singing was loudest. "Morrison!" I shouted. "Stop!" She didn't even turn around. The 5 of them walked into the tunnel and disappeared. The singing swallowed them up. "They're already gone," the coal singer said. "Joined the Brotherhood. Good workers, those 5. They'll meet their quotas." "What did you do to them?" I demanded. "Gave them purpose. Gave them meaning. Gave them family." He stepped closer. "That's what mining is, boys. Brotherhood. Down here, everyone pulls together. Everyone works toward the same goal. No quitting, no running away, no abandoning your crew when times get hard." The way he said that last part, it felt aimed at me. Like he knew about my mining career, about how I'd left when the black lung got bad, while other men stayed and died. "You worked coal once," the coal singer said to me. "I can smell it on you. Smell the dust in your lungs. You were good at it, too. Strong back, good hands, smart enough to stay safe. Why'd you leave?" "I got sick," I said. "You got scared." His voice turned harsh. Scared of the dark, scared of the work, scared of dying like a real miner. "So you ran up to the surface and put on a ranger costume and pretended you were better than the men still digging." "That's not—" "Your daddy didn't run. Your uncle didn't run. They stayed and did the work until the mountain took them. Died like men. Died with their brothers." The coal singer's face twisted into something angry and sad at once. "But you ran, and now you spend your days sealing up the mines, keeping people out, acting like the coal is evil. Like we're evil." "The mine killed those men in 1958, I said. 23 people died." "23 miners joined the Brotherhood," he corrected. "We didn't die. We became part of the mountain, part of the coal, part of something bigger than ourselves. And we're still working, still meeting our quotas, still doing what we were born to do." Bobby's hand found mine in the darkness. He pressed something into my palm, a small canister. "Emergency flare." I closed my fingers around it, keeping it hidden. "What if we don't want to join?" Bobby asked. The coal singer's smile returned. "Everyone wants to join eventually, once they understand, once they feel the rhythm of the work, the satisfaction of a good day's digging, the pride of pulling coal from the earth. It's in your blood, Samuel Blackwater, third-generation miner. You can feel it calling you home." He was right about one thing. I could feel something. A pull, deep in my chest, like the mountain itself was breathing and trying to draw me in. The singing had gotten into my head. I found my foot tapping in rhythm with the distant hammering. I bit down on my tongue, hard enough to taste blood. The pain cleared my head. "Bobby," I whispered, "when I light this flare, run for the side tunnel, the one without any light. Sam, trust me." I pulled the pin on the flare and threw it at the coal sides, Anger's feet. It exploded in brilliant red light, so bright after the darkness that everyone flinched, even the ghost miners. "Run!" We bolted for the darkest tunnel, a narrow crack in the rock I'd spotted earlier. Behind us, the coal singer roared like a cave-in, and the sound of picks against stone became deafening. The tunnel was barely wide enough for our shoulders. We scraped along sideways, lights bouncing wildly. I could hear the miners behind us, but they were too big to follow quickly. We had seconds of lead time, maybe. The tunnel opened into another chamber. This one was different. Natural cave, not mined. Stalactites hung from the ceiling, and an underground stream ran across the floor. The water was black, stained by decades of mine runoff. "Old ventilation shaft should be above us," I panted. "Natural cave system connects to it. If we can climb—" The wall exploded, not metaphorically. The solid rock wall just exploded outward, and miners poured through like water from a burst dam. They came from above, below, from cracks too small for humans. They flowed like liquid shadow, reforming into solid shapes. Bobby screamed and ran for the stream. I followed, splashing through water so cold it burned. On the far side was another tunnel, this one going up at a steep angle. We scrambled up the slope, using our hands, feet slipping on loose rock. Behind us, the miners flowed across the stream without disturbing the water. They didn't walk. They glided, feet not quite touching the ground. The tunnel got steeper. Bobby went first, finding handholds in the dark. I was right behind him when I heard the rumble. "Cave in!" I shouted. The ceiling came down between us. Not a natural collapse, too precise, too controlled. The coal singer had caused it, trapping us on opposite sides. "Sam!" Bobby's voice came through the rocks. "Sam, are you okay?" "I'm fine. Keep going up. Find the ventilation shaft." "I can't leave you." "You have to. Get help. That's an order." Silence. Then, "I'll come back for you." "I know." I heard him climbing away. Then silence. I turned it around. The miners stood at the bottom of the slope, watching me. The coal singer walked through them like smoke, ascending the slope slowly. He had all the time in the world. "Brave," he said. "Stupid, but brave. Sent your partner away so he could escape, just like a real miner, putting your brother's safety before your own." "He's getting help," I said. "Rangers, police, rescue teams. They'll tear this mountain apart to find me." "Let them try. Let them dig. Let them blast. Every hole they make is another tunnel for us to use. Every shaft they sink brings them closer to joining us." He stopped 10 feet away, looking at me with something like pity. "You don't understand yet. The mountain doesn't end. The coal doesn't end. The work doesn't end. We're not trapped here, Samuel. We're free. Free from worry, from pain, from the fear of death. We're free to do what we were meant to do forever." "That's not freedom," I said. "That's hell." "Is it?" He gestured around at the darkness. "Your father died in a mine, crushed when a support beam failed. It took him 6 hours to die, pinned under the rock, alone in the dark. Do you think he felt free? Do you think he felt happy about his choices?" My throat tightened. I'd been 15 when my father died. They wouldn't let me see the body. "But if he was here," the coal singer continued, "he'd still be alive. Still working, still strong. You could see him again. Talk to him. Work beside him like you did when you were a boy. Doesn't that sound better than death?" "My father's dead," I said. "And you're dead too. Whatever you are now, you're not alive. We're more than alive. We're eternal." He took another step closer. "Last chance, Samuel. Join us willingly, or join us by force. Either way, you're not leaving this mountain." I looked at the pile of rock blocking the tunnel behind me. No way through. I looked at the miners below, their empty eyes reflecting our lights. No way down. I did the only thing left. I ran up. The tunnel got smaller as I climbed, forcing me to crawl. Sharp rocks tore at my clothes and skin. Behind me, I heard the coal singer laugh. Not a human sound, but the grinding of stone against stone. "Run, little miner. Run like you always do." The tunnel angled sharply upward, nearly vertical. I wedged my back against one wall and my feet against the other, chimney climbing the way my uncle had taught me when I was young. Every muscle screamed, my lungs burned, the black lung making every breath a battle. Something grabbed my ankle. I looked down and saw a miner hanging upside down from the ceiling, defying gravity, his coal dust face grinning up at me. His hand was ice cold through my boot. I kicked hard, catching him in the face. He didn't let go. Instead, he pulled, trying to drag me back down. I remembered the pickaxe on my belt, a small rock hammer I carried for sample collecting. I swung it down hard, aiming for his wrist. The hammer passed through his arm like smoke, but he jerked back anyway, losing his grip. I scrambled up faster, not looking back. The tunnel opened into another chamber. This one was different from all the others. It was the original 1958 disaster site. I could tell because the walls were scorched black from the explosion that had killed the miners. Support beams lay scattered like broken bones. And in the center of the chamber was a pile of rubble where the ceiling had collapsed 30 years ago. 23 men had died here. Their bodies were still under that rubble. The coal singer emerged from the tunnel behind me, his form flickering between solid and shadow. The other miners flowed in after him, surrounding me. "This is where it happened," the coal singer said quietly. "This is where we died. Where the company cut corners on safety. Where the supports failed because they were old and rotted. Where the gas pocket ignited and brought the mountain down on our heads." He walked to the rubble pile and placed his hand on it, almost tenderly. We screamed for help, screamed for days. but nobody came. They sealed the shaft to prevent more explosions, sealed us in. We died slow, one by one, some from injuries, some from suffocation, some from just giving up. He looked at me. You know what the worst part was? Not the dying, the knowing that we'd been abandoned, that our lives weren't worth the cost of a rescue. For the first time, I felt something like sympathy for him, for all of them. I'm sorry, I said, and meant it. That should never have happened. Sorry doesn't feed families. Sorry doesn't pay medical bills. Sorry doesn't bring back fathers and brothers and sons. His voice hardened. But work is forever. Work gives meaning, and now we work forever, meeting quotas, expanding the mine, doing what we were meant to do, and anyone who comes down here can join us. Is that what happened to Morrison's team? They joined you? They understood. Once you spend enough time underground, once you feel the rhythm of the work, you understand. The surface world is meaningless, just scrambling and fighting and dying for nothing. But down here, we're brothers. We take care of each other. Forever. I looked at the rubble pile again, understanding something. You can't leave, can you? You're tied to this spot, to where you died. His face darkened. We can go anywhere the coal goes, anywhere the tunnels reach, and we're always digging new tunnels, expanding our territory. In 100 years, we'll have tunnels under every mountain in Kentucky. In 1,000 years, we'll reach the entire Appalachian range, and everywhere we go, we'll find good workers to join us. You're building a kingdom of ghosts. We're building a brotherhood that will outlast every living thing on this planet. He raised his hand, and every miner raised their picks. Join us, Samuel Blackwater, third-generation miner, son of the coal. Join us and see your father again. And I saw him. My father stepped out from behind the coal singer. He looked exactly like I remembered, strong, weathered, with kind eyes and calloused hands. He smiled at me the way he used to when I did good work. Sammy, he said, using the name he'd called me as a boy. I've been waiting for you. My vision blurred. I'd spent 32 years without him. 32 years wondering if he'd been afraid when he died, if he'd thought about me in those final hours. Dad? Join us, son. We'll work together like we used to. Remember how good it felt? The satisfaction of a hard day's work? The pride of bringing coal up from the deep? That can be forever. I took a step toward him. My hand reached out. Then I stopped. What was the last thing you said to me? I asked. My father smiled. I said I loved you. No. My hand dropped. You said, get an education. Get out of the mines. Live better than I did. The figure flickered, my father's face twisting into something else, something made of coal dust and shadow and rage. Those were your last words to me, I continued, my voice breaking. You didn't want me to end up like you. You wanted me to live, to breathe clean air, to see daylight. You're not my father. You're just using his face to trap me. The coal singer's mask dropped completely. He's here, though. Part of this mountain. Part of us. And he does want you here. All of them do. Every miner who ever died underground, they want their sons and brothers and friends to join the eternal shift. Then they're not the men I knew, I said. Because real miners, real brothers, don't trap each other. They set each other free. I pulled out my last flare, the backup I'd kept hidden, but I didn't throw it at them. I threw it at the rubble pile. The flare landed among the rocks and ignited, its brilliant light filling the chamber. And in that light, I saw the truth. The rubble pile wasn't just rocks, it was bones. 23 skeletons, still in their mining clothes, crushed and broken. The coal singer and his crew were king miners. They were corpses, animated by rage and resentment and the refusal to accept death. Look at yourselves, I shouted. You're not alive. You're not even ghosts. You're just pain and anger wearing dead men's faces. The coal singer screamed, a sound like a mine collapse, like metal tearing, like the earth breaking apart. The other miners screamed with him, and the chamber shook. "If we can't have you willing," the coal singer roared, "we'll take you broken." The ceiling cracked. Large chunks of rock began falling. A real collapse, not a controlled one. He was going to bring the whole mountain down on me, just like what had killed him. I ran for the only exit, a crack in the wall near the rubble pile, barely visible in the flare light. I dove through it as the ceiling came down, rock smashing where I'd been standing. The crack became a tunnel, this one natural and winding. I could hear the stream somewhere below. The ventilation system I'd remembered from the old mine maps. If I could reach it, I could follow it to the surface. Behind me, the miners flowed through solid rock, chasing. But they were slower now, their forms flickering and unstable. The flare had weakened them somehow, or maybe just seeing their own corpses had reminded them of what they really were. The tunnel opened onto a ledge above the underground stream. Below, I could see a section of rusted metal, part of the old ventilation shaft, collapsed into the cave system. I didn't think. I jumped. The water was freezing and fast, carrying me downstream through absolute darkness. I kept my head up, gasping for air when I could. The current slammed me into rocks, walls, submerged debris. Then I saw light. Real light. Daylight. The stream poured out of a crack in the mountain face, becoming a waterfall that dropped 30 feet to the forest floor. I went over the edge, still holding my breath, hitting 2. He pooled below hard enough to see stars. When I surfaced, the sun was setting. The forest was full of sound. Birds, insects, wind in the trees. I crawled out of the pool and collapsed on the Ikoban bank, coughing up black water mixed with coal dust and blood. I was alive. Behind me, deep in the mountain, I could still hear the singing. They found me 3 hours later. Bobby had made it out and brought a full rescue team. I spent 2 weeks in the hospital with pneumonia, cracked ribs, and black lung symptoms, worse than I'd had in years. The doctors couldn't explain the coal dust in my lungs. I'd only been underground for 6 hours, but I was coughing up dust like I'd mined for a decade. Bobby Coalfield never came back. He went into the mine with the rescue team looking for me, and they found him at the 1958 collapse site. Alive, but changed. He kept saying he'd found his true brothers and refused to leave. They had to drag him out sedated, and when he woke up at the hospital, he tried to go back. They committed him for psychiatric evaluation. Last I heard, he was still there, drawing maps of tunnels that don't exist and singing mining songs from before he was born. The survey team, all 5 of them, were found working in one of the deep chambers. They'd been underground for 9 days by then. They had no food, no water, and they were excavating coal with their bare hands. Their fingernails were gone, their hands bloody to the bone, but they were smiling. 2 of them recovered enough to go home. 3 are still in psychiatric care 20 years later, drawing the same maps Bobby draws. The mining company classified the entire mountain as geologically unstable and sealed every entrance they could find. But seismic sensors they installed keep detecting activity. Rhythmic vibrations consistent with pick-and-shovel mining coming from deeper than any recorded shaft. The activity increases every year, and it's spreading to other mountains. I'm 57 now, still a ranger, though I've requested transfer away from mine sites. The black lung is getting worse. I cough you. Pee coal dust every morning, even though I haven't been underground in 10 years. It's like the mountain is still inside me, or I'm still part of the mountain. Sometimes, late at night, I hear the singing. Not in my ears, deeper than that. In my bones, in my blood. The rhythm of picks against coal, the brotherhood of men in darkness, the call to come home and join the eternal shift. I know what I saw. I know what I escaped. But part of me, a part that sounds like my father's voice, wonders if the coal singer was right. Wonders if that brotherhood, that purpose, that eternal work, might be better than this slow death by black lung. Better than dying alone in a hospital bed, drowning in fluids, struggling for each breath. I keep files on similar incidents across Appalachia. Mine disasters where bodies were never recovered. Abandoned shafts where people go missing. Reports of singing in the deep places, of lights in the darkness, of the rhythmic sound of mining where no living person works. There are dozens of them, maybe hundreds. And the pattern is spreading. More disappearances every year, more reports of impossible phenomena, more mountains that wildlife avoids and locals fear. Last week, I got a letter from Morrison's family. She committed suicide 3 months ago, left a note that just said, "I need to go back underground." Her funeral is next week. I'm not going. I'm afraid if I go, I'll see her there, standing at the back of the church, smiling with those empty eyes. I'm writing this as a warning. If you work in forestry, mining safety, environmental protection, any job that takes you near old mine sites in Appalachia, listen carefully. If you hear singing in an abandoned mine, leave immediately. If you find fresh coal dust in sealed shafts, report it and never go back. If you see lights deep underground, turn around and run. And if you hear picks ringing in the darkness, if you hear that brotherhood call, if you feel the pull to go deeper and join the eternal shift, fight it. Fight it with everything you have. Because the coal singer is patient and he's always hiring, and once you join his crew, you never clock out. The mine takes care of its own, forever. I felt it again this morning. That pull, that rhythm in my bones. My black lung is worse. The doctors say I have maybe a year left. Sometimes when I'm coughing up coal dust, I can taste it. Not just coal, but something deeper. The mountain's breath. The singer's call. I'm afraid that when I die, I won't go to whatever comes after. I'm afraid I'll go back underground. Back to Black Mountain. Back to the eternal shift where my father is waiting. And the worst part? The part that keeps me awake at night? Part of me wants to. God help me, part of me wants to. My name is Victoria Windwalker, and I've been a forest ranger for 11 years. People always ask about my name. Yeah, it's real. My mom was Cherokee, Dad was Irish, and they both had a sense of humor about mixing cultures. I grew up hearing stories from both sides, but I never believed the scary ones. Bone gardens, spirit guardians. I figured they were just ways to keep kids from messing with old burial sites. I wish I'd listened. September in the Monongahela National Forest is beautiful. The leaves start turning, the air gets crisp, and tourists mostly clear out. That's when I do my best work. Checking on the archaeological sites, making sure nobody's been digging where they shouldn't. Panther Mountain is my responsibility. 4,000 feet of dense forest with more history buried under it than anyone wants to think about. The call came in on a Tuesday morning. 3 graduate students from the university, missing for 5 days. They'd been doing research on pre-Columbian burial practices. Their advisor said they were supposed to check in daily. They hadn't. I met Joseph Standing Bear at the trailhead just after dawn. He was 58, a Cherokee elder who worked as our tribal liaison. Where I had book learning, Joseph had real knowledge, the kind passed down through generations. His grandfather had been a bone speaker, whatever that meant. "You feel it?" Joseph asked as we started up the trail. "Feel what?" "The mountain's upset." I didn't feel anything except nervous about 3 missing kids. But I didn't say so. Joseph had worked with me long enough to know when I was humoring him. The temperature was 52 degrees, perfect hiking weather, but something was off. The birds weren't singing. Not just quiet. Completely silent. In 11 years, I'd never heard the forest this dead. "When was the last time you checked this site?" Joseph asked. 2 weeks ago. Every day. Hang was fine. The stone markers were in place, no signs of disturbance. We reached the excavation site around 9. What I saw made my stomach drop. The students' gear was scattered everywhere. Tents, backpacks, research equipment. But it wasn't ransacked. It was arranged. Their tools were laid out in a perfect circle around the dig site. Their notebooks were stacked in a neat pile, each one open to the same page. "They found something," Joseph said quietly. The dig site itself had been partially filled back in, not by erosion or animals. Someone had deliberately shoveled dirt back into the hole. But the soil was smooth, almost polished. No shovel marks. No footprints. I picked up one of the notebooks. The last entry was dated 5 days ago. We've found the entrance. The bone arrangements are incredible. Going in to map the chambers. Back by nightfall. Entrance to what? I asked. Joseph was staring at the trees. I followed his gaze and felt my skin crawl. The trees were growing wrong. 6 old oaks formed a perfect hexagon around the site, their trunks exactly the same distance apart. The roots above ground twisted together like fingers. Long, white fingers made of wood. That's not natural, I said. No, Joseph agreed. It's not. I pulled out my radio to call for backup, but it only gave static. My cell phone had no signal, normal this far up the mountain. We were on our own. We need to find those students, I said, trying to sound calm and professional. They might be hurt. Joseph knelt by the dig site and brushed away some of the loose dirt. Underneath was stone, old carved stone. Symbols I didn't recognize covered its surface. This is a warning marker, he said. It says the Guardians are watching. Guardians of what? The bones. A sound drifted through the trees. Wind chimes, light and musical. But there were no wind chimes up here. There was not, hing up here but forest. Victoria, Joseph said, his voice tight. We need to be very careful. The students didn't just find a burial site. They found something much older. I wanted to argue, to insist there was a rational explanation. But the sound of those impossible wind chimes wrapped around us, and the trees with their root fingers seemed to lean closer, and somewhere deep in the mountain, I swear I heard something moving. Something made of clicking, rattling pieces that shouldn't be able to move at all. We spent an hour searching the area around the dig site. The students' trail cameras were still running, memory cards full. I pulled one and checked the footage on my portable viewer. The first few days were normal. 3 students carefully excavating, taking measurements, documenting everything. Sarah Chen, Marcus Washington, and David Kowalski. I'd met them during my last inspection. Good kids, respectful of the site. Then the footage got weird. On day 3, they uncovered a stone door in the side of the hill. Not a natural cave opening, an actual door carved with the same symbols as the warning marker. They were excited, talking quickly about how this could be their doctoral thesis. The last clip showed them entering the doorway with flashlights and cameras. The timestamp was 4:47 p.m. 5 days ago. We're going in after them, I said. Joseph shook his head. We need to do this properly. There are protocols. Those kids have been missing for 5 days. We don't have time for... Listen. I stopped. The wind chime sound had changed. It was closer now, and beneath it, I heard something else. A whisper, like dozens of voices speaking just below the threshold of hearing. What is that? I whispered back. The mountain, talking to itself. Joseph pulled a leather pouch from his jacket and removed several items I didn't recognize. Bundles of dried plants, small carved bones, a stone that seemed to glow faintly in the shadows. I'm going to ask permission to enter, he said. You stay here. Joseph, I can't let you. I'm not asking. He approached. The stone door, which was still partially visible where the students had cleared away dirt and roots. He began speaking in Cherokee, his voice low and rhythmic. I didn't understand the words, but they made the air feel heavier somehow, like pressure before a storm. The whispers stopped. The entire forest went silent. Even the wind died. Joseph continued speaking faster now, his hands moving in specific patterns. Then, from inside the hill, something answered. It wasn't words. It was a sound like bones clicking together, like hundreds of pieces of a skeleton shifting and rearranging. The stone door swung inward, revealing darkness beyond. Joseph turned to me, his face pale. They're allowing us to enter. But Victoria, whatever you see in there, don't touch anything, don't move anything, and for God's sake, don't disturb any bones. You believe this, I said, not a question. I believe what my grandfather taught me. There are places where the dead don't rest, they protect. This is one of those places. I pulled out my flashlight, checked my first aid kit, and grabbed a radio, even though I knew it wouldn't work. Let's go find those students. The doorway was narrow, forcing us to go single file. Joseph led, still carrying his protective items. The air inside was cold and dry, like a tomb. Our flashlights showed walls made of stacked stone, expertly fitted without mortar. After 20 feet, the passage opened into a chamber. I've seen a lot of things in my career: ancient pottery, burial mounds, even a few intact ceremonial sites, but nothing prepared me for what was in that chamber. Bones, thousands of them covering every surface. But they weren't scattered or broken. They were arranged in patterns. Skulls formed archways. Ribs curved into delicate spirals. Leg bones stood in perfectly straight lines like columns supporting the ceiling. "This is impossible," I breathed. "This would take years to arrange, and it would all collapse." "It's not arranged," Joseph said quietly. "It's grown. Look closer." I didn't want to look closer, but I did. He was right. The bones weren't just stacked. They were connected, fused together in ways that shouldn't be possible. A skull melded into a pelvis, finger bones woven through vertebrae like threads. The entire chamber was made of bones that had somehow grown together into a single massive structure. "The students came through here," Joseph said, pointing to footprints in the dust. "Recently." We followed the prints deeper into the mountain. More chambers, each one more elaborate than the last. In one room, the bones formed a perfect spiral pattern on the floor, like a maze. In another, they created what looked like a tree, branches reaching up to a ceiling carved with stars. Then we found the first student. Marcus Washington was in the third chamber, standing perfectly still in the center of the room. His eyes were open, staring at nothing. He didn't respond when I called his name. I ran to him, checking for a pulse. His skin was cold, but he was breathing. "Marcus, can you hear me?" His mouth moved, but no sound came out at first. Then, in a voice that didn't quite sound like his own, "We're guarding now. We're part of the watch." "What happened to you?" "Where are Sarah and David?" "Deeper. With the others. We're all guarding now." I grabbed his shoulders, trying to get him to focus on me. "Marcus, I'm going to get you out of here." His eyes finally moved, looking directly at me. "You shouldn't be here. You're not bones yet. You're not ready to guard." Behind us, Joseph sucked in a sharp breath. I turned to see what he was looking at. The bones in the walls were moving, not falling apart, moving, rearranging themselves. Skulls turning to face us, finger bones curling like they were beckoning. The clicking, rattling sound grew louder, echoing through the chamber. "We need to leave," Joseph said urgently. "Now!" But the entrance we'd come through was blocked. Bones had grown across it, forming a solid wall of fused skeletal remains. From deeper in the mountain, I heard footsteps, multiple sets, walking in perfect unison. And underneath that sound, more whispers, dozens of voices, maybe hundreds, all speaking the same words over and over. "Guard the bones. Protect the sacred. Add to the watch." "Joseph," I said, my voice shaking, "what the hell is this place?" "It's what the stories warned about," he replied, pulling out his protective items again. "It's a bone orchard, where the dead grow guardians." The footsteps were getting closer. The figures emerged from the darkness of the deeper chambers. At first I thought they were people wearing strange costumes. Then my flashlight caught them fully, and I understood why Marcus was standing so still. They weren't people anymore. Sarah Chen and David Kowalski walked in perfect lockstep, their movements synchronized. But their bodies were wrong. Bones, not their bones, old bones from the chamber walls, had begun to grow into them. White fragments pierced through their clothes, wrapping around their arms and legs like vines. Sarah's face was partially covered by what looked like a skeletal mask that had fused with her cheek. "Sarah," I shouted. "David, we're here to help you." They stopped walking. Both tilted their heads at exactly the same angle, studying us with eyes that didn't blink. "We don't need help," Sarah's voice said, but her mouth didn't move quite right. "We understand now. We were supposed to find this place. We're supposed to join the watch." Joseph stepped between me and the students, holding up one of his carved bones. He spoke in Cherokee again, faster and more urgent than before. The bone-covered students recoiled slightly but didn't leave. Behind them I saw more figures, dozens of them, all partially consumed by the ancient bones of the chamber. Some were recent, people who'd gone missing in these mountains over the years. But others were older, their clothes rotted away, nothing left but the combination of their skeleton and the chamber's bones, all fused into walking. "Guardians! This can't be real," I whispered. "Your ground-penetrating radar," Joseph said without taking his eyes off the Guardians. "What did it show when you surveyed this mountain last year?" I tried to remember. "Anomalies. The readings went crazy, showing bone structures going down hundreds of feet. We figured the equipment was malfunctioning." "It wasn't malfunctioning. This place goes deep. How many people do you think have been buried in this mountain over the centuries?" "Thousands. Native American burial grounds, Civil War mass graves, pioneer cemeteries lost to time. This whole mountain was one enormous graveyard, and somehow all those bones were connected." The Guardian that used to be David Kowalski spoke next. "The desecration woke us. People kept digging, disturbing the sacred sleep. So the bones learned to protect themselves. They learned to move, to grow, to add willing volunteers to the watch." "Willing?" I said. "You're students. You didn't volunteer for this." "We did when we opened the door without permission," Sarah's voice said. "We disturbed the rest. Now we restore it by becoming guardians ourselves." The bone walls around us shuddered. More skeletal hands emerged, reaching toward us like the roots of the trees outside. Joseph continued his chanting, and where his words touched, the bones hesitated. "Can you stop them?" I asked him. "I can slow them down. The old words still have power here. But Victoria, there are too many. This whole mountain is their body now." Marcus Washington, standing behind us, spoke again in that hollow voice. "Join us. It's peaceful. You stop being afraid. You stop being alone. You become part of something eternal." "Shut up, Marcus," I snapped. Then immediately felt guilty. This wasn't his fault. A sound from behind made me spin around. The bone wall that had blocked our exit was opening again, but not to let us out. And more Guardians were coming in. Older ones, nothing human left to them. Just animated skeletons, moving with purpose and intelligence. Joseph grabbed my arm. "We need to go deeper." "Deeper? That's where more of them are." "The Bone Speaker's chamber. If it exists, it'll be at the heart of the orchard. That's the only place we might be able to negotiate." "Negotiate with what?" "With whatever consciousness is running this place." We ran. The Guardians didn't chase us. They herded us, blocking passages and forcing us down specific tunnels. They wanted us to go deeper. They wanted us at the heart of their orchard. The chambers grew larger and more elaborate as we descended. In one room, bones formed a massive spiral staircase that circled down into darkness. In another, they'd created pillars and arches like a cathedral, except every surface was skeletal remains fused into architecture. My radio crackled suddenly, making me jump. A voice came through, distorted and broken. "All watching, all guarding, forever." "That's not possible," I said. "Radio waves can't penetrate this deep." "It's not radio waves," Joseph panted as we ran. "They're using the bones. The whole mountain is their nervous system now. They can communicate through it." We reached a chamber so large our flashlights couldn't find the far wall. The floor was a mosaic of bones arranged in geometric patterns that hurt to look at. They seemed to shift and change when I wasn't looking directly at them. In the center of the chamber stood something that made me stop running. A throne, made entirely of human skulls, hundreds of them, all fused together and polished smooth by time. And sitting on that throne was a figure, not a guardian, something older. It was a complete skeleton, but the bones gleamed white as fresh snow, untouched by time. It wore fragments of clothing, leather and beads and copper jewelry that marked it as centuries old. Around its neck hung a massive gorget made of carved bone. "A bone speaker," Joseph whispered, and I heard reverence and fear in his voice. The first, guardian. The skeleton's jaw moved. When it spoke, the voice came from everywhere at once, resonating through every bone in the chamber. You disturb the sacred rest." Joseph immediately performed a complicated gesture with his hands, then spoke in Cherokee. The skeleton listened, motionless except for the faint glow that seemed to emanate from deep within its bones. When Joseph finished, I asked, "What did you tell it?" "The truth, that we're here to rescue those who disturb the rest unknowingly, that we understand the sacred duty of protection, that we ask for mercy." The bone speaker's skull tilted, considering. Behind us, more guardians had gathered, dozens of them, filling the chamber. We were surrounded. "The young ones opened the door," the bone speaker's voice echoed. "They dug without asking. They disturbed without honoring. They took photographs of what should not be shown. For this, they joined the Eternal Watch." "They didn't know," I said. "They're students. They were just—" "Ignorance is not innocence." The guardians took a step closer. I felt Joseph tense beside me. "But you," the bone speaker continued, and its empty eye sockets seemed to focus on me. "You are different. You have walked the mountain with respect. You have turned away those who would desecrate. You have Cherokee blood. You are worthy to speak." "Then I'm speaking," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Let those students go. They made a mistake, but they don't deserve this. Take me instead if you need someone." "Victoria, no," Joseph started. The bone speaker laughed. It was the worst sound I've ever heard. Dry, rattling, like wind through a cemetery. "Noble, but unnecessary. The young ones have already accepted their place. They are becoming bone and duty, just as I did 1,000 years ago. But you can make a different choice." The skeleton raised one hand, and the guardian's par, Ted. Behind them, a passage opened in the bone wall, leading up and out. "Leave now and seal the entrance behind you. Speak the old words of protection. Keep others from disturbing what rests here. Do this and you may go free." "And the students?" "2 may leave. Their transformation is not yet complete. One is already accepted fully. He stays to guard, as is his choice." I looked at Joseph. He nodded slowly. "It's the best deal we'll get." "Marcus?" I asked. "He spoke the words of acceptance," the bone speaker said. "He understands now. He is content. The other 2, they may still remember who they were. Take them, if you can carry them." The guardians brought Sarah and David to us. Up close, I could see the bones weren't just growing into them. They were replacing them. Sarah's left arm was more bone than flesh now, the fingers elongated and split into multiple joints. David's ribs had burst through his shirt, fusing with ancient remains to form a larger, more protective cage. But their eyes, underneath the bone growth, their eyes still looked human, still scared. "Can you reverse this?" I asked Joseph quietly. "I don't know. Maybe partially, if we act fast." I turned back to the bone speaker. "We accept your terms, but I need your word that if we keep this place protected, you won't take anyone else. No more hikers who stumble in by accident. No more missing people." The skeleton was silent for a long moment. Then, "Agreed. But know this, Windwalker. You now carry responsibility. If the sacred rest is disturbed again, if anyone desecrates what we guard, you will answer for it. You will join us, willingly or not." "I understand." "Do you?" The bone speaker stood from its throne. Even missing all its muscle and flesh, it was tall, over 7 feet. "You understand that this mountain is a memorial to thousands of souls? That beneath your feet lies the resting place of war, Ryers and mothers, children and elders, stretching back before your people had words for counting time?" It walked toward me, and every guardian in the chamber swayed in unison with its movement. "You understand that when the Earthbreakers came with their machines, when the grave robbers came with their greed, when the archaeologists came with their cameras, we watched and waited and remembered. And when enough desecration had been done, when enough sleep had been broken, we decided, no more." The bone speaker reached out and touched my forehead with one skeletal finger. Ice shot through my skull. Images flooded my mind. I saw the mountain as it had been centuries ago, covered in burial mounds. I saw ceremonies performed with respect and love. I saw the first bone speaker, a Cherokee priest who chose to remain after death to guard his people's rest. I saw him slowly learning to move the bones around him, teaching them to protect themselves. I saw decades pass, then centuries. More burials added to the mountain's store of remains. The bone speaker teaching his knowledge to others, creating the first guardians. A network of protection spreading through the entire mountain, all the bones connected, all of them learning to move as one. Then I saw the violations. Grave robbers in the 1800s digging up burials for artifacts to sell. Road construction in the 1900s, dynamiting through sacred sites. Hikers treating ancient stones as curiosities. And archaeologists, so many archaeologists, taking bones away for study, putting them in boxes, destroying the connection. The bones learned to fight back. The bone speaker removed its finger from my forehead. I staggered, and Joseph caught me. "Now you understand," the bone speaker said. "Now you can speak for us to your world. Tell them, these bones are not artifacts. They are people. They are still people. And they will protect themselves." "I'll tell them," I managed to say. "Good. Now take the young ones and go. Your companion will teach you the sealing ritual. Perform it before dawn, or the agreement is void." Joseph helped Sarah and David to their feet. They moved stiffly, the bone growths making their joints work wrong. Sarah was crying. I could see tears running down her face, even though her expression didn't change. "Marcus," I called out. "Are you sure about this?" He emerged from the crowd of guardians. More bone had grown into him since I'd last seen him. His right leg was entirely skeletal now, his spine reinforced with ancient vertebrae. But he was smiling. "I'm sure, Ranger Windwalker, someone needs to pay the price for what we did. And honestly, it's not so bad. I can feel everyone who's buried here. I'm never alone. I'm part of something that matters. Your parents will understand eventually. Tell them I chose this. Tell them I'm protecting something important." The guardians began to close around him, welcoming him into their eternal watch. Marcus looked at me one last time. "Thank you for trying to save us," he said. Then the guardians swallowed him completely, and he was gone. "Time to go," Joseph said urgently. We started back through the chambers, half carrying Sarah and David. The guardians lined the passages but didn't interfere. They watched us go with empty eye sockets and patient stillness. As we climbed, Joseph explained the sealing ritual. What herbs to burn, what words to say, what symbols to draw on the stone door. I memorized every detail, knowing that our lives depended on getting it right. We emerged from the mountain just as the first hints of dawn touched the sky. Sarah and David collapsed immediately, the bone growths making them too heavy to support their own weight. I radioed for emergency extraction while Joseph gathered materials for the ritual. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely work the radio, but I managed to call in medical evacuation and backup rangers. "Don't tell them what happened," Joseph said as he arranged stones and herbs. "They won't believe it. They'll just desecrate the site trying to investigate." "What do we tell them?" "Cave collapse. The students got trapped. We got them out. Marcus was too. Deep. We couldn't reach him in time." I hated lying. But I looked at Sarah and David, at the bones still fused into their bodies, and knew Joseph was right. If we told the truth, they'd send teams in. More people would die, or worse. We performed the sealing ritual as dawn broke over Panther Mountain. Joseph sang the old words while I drew symbols in the dirt with ash. The stone door swung closed by itself, and I felt something shift in the mountain, like it was relaxing, settling back into sleep. The bone growths on Sarah and David began to recede. Slowly, millimeter by millimeter, the ancient bones withdrew from their bodies, leaving behind scars and missing pieces, but giving them back their humanity. When the medical helicopter arrived an hour later, they looked almost normal. Almost. Sarah and David spent 3 weeks in the hospital. The doctors were baffled by their injuries. Bones that seemed to have been broken and healed wrong, calcium deposits in impossible places, scars that looked decades old despite being fresh. But both students were alive, and that was what mattered. They didn't remember much. The bone speaker had been merciful in that way. Their memories of the deep chambers were foggy, dreamlike. They knew they'd found something in the mountain, knew something bad had happened, but the details were lost. Marcus Washington was officially listed as missing, presumed dead in a cave collapse. His body was never recovered. His parents held a memorial service. I attended and said nothing about their son choosing to become an eternal guardian of sacred bones. What could I say? That he was still there, still conscious, still protecting? That he was happier as a skeleton than he'd been as a student? They'd think I was crazy. Maybe I am crazy. The University of West Virginia classified Panther Mountain as a culturally sensitive area requiring restricted access. No MO. Re-archaeological digs. No more student expeditions, just quarterly monitoring by yours truly, making sure the seals remain intact and the mountain stays quiet. But something changed in me during those hours underground. Joseph says I performed bone speaking in the deep chamber without realizing it. That when I spoke to the bone speaker, I used words I shouldn't have known. His grandfather's gift, passed down through whatever Cherokee blood runs in my veins. Now I can feel the mountain breathing. I know when someone crosses the boundary line. I can sense disturbances in the bones, feel when the guardians grow restless. It's like having an extra sense, and I hate it as much as I depend on it. 3 months after the incident, I started having dreams. Marcus speaks to me sometimes, his voice carried on underground currents that have nothing to do with sound. He tells me about the watch, how the guardians don't sleep, don't tire, don't age, how they're patient, how they're growing. Because here's what keeps me awake at night. Panther Mountain isn't unique. Joseph's grandfather mentioned other bone orchards throughout the Appalachian range, places where enough dead have been disturbed that the bones learn to protect themselves. We've had reports from other rangers, strange movements at burial sites, missing hikers near sacred grounds, archaeological teams abandoning digs because of equipment malfunctions that seem suspiciously like warnings. The bones are teaching each other, creating a network of protection that spans tribal boundaries and historical periods. Cherokee bones speaking to Creek bones, speaking to Shawnee bones, and even the Civil War dead are joining in. Everyone who died in these mountains, everyone who is buried with ceremony and respect, is waking up to protect what's sacred. Sarah recovered enough to finish her degree, though she changed her focus from physical archaeology to cultural preservation. She advocates now for leaving burial sites alone, and she never explains exactly why she's so passionate about it. Sometimes I see her touch. Her left arm, the one that was mostly bone for a few terrible hours, and I know she remembers more than she admits. David dropped out of the program entirely. Last I heard, he was working at a cemetery in Pittsburgh. Joseph says that's common. People who've been touched by bone magic are drawn to protect the dead afterward. It's not quite joining the Guardians, but it's not quite free will either. I still do my rounds on Panther Mountain, still check the seals, still make sure nobody tries to excavate where they shouldn't. The bone speaker keeps its word. No more disappearances, no more guardians adding to their numbers. But every time I pass those 6 oak trees with their root fingers, every time I hear wind chimes on still days, I remember what's underneath. Thousands of bones, all connected, all watching, all waiting to see if the living will honor the agreement. Last week, a geology team requested permission to do ground-penetrating radar surveys of the mountain. I denied the request. They appealed to my supervisor, who approved it anyway. The survey is scheduled for next month. I've tried explaining the cultural sensitivity, the protected status, the danger. But bureaucrats see opportunities for research, for papers, for funding. They don't believe in bone orchards or skeletal guardians or ancient consciousnesses that span centuries. Joseph and I are preparing new rituals, stronger seals, but he's worried. The bone speaker warned us. If we can't keep the mountain protected, we'll answer for the failure. I think about Marcus sometimes, about his choice to stay, about how he's part of something eternal now, something that matters. about how he said it wasn't so bad being a guardian. I wonder if I'll find out firsthand. Because when those radar arrays go active next month, when the electromagnetic pulses start mapping the bones underground, disturbing their rest, I know what will happen. The guardians will wake fully. They'll rise to protect what's sacred, and I'll have to choose. Let them add more people to their watch, or honor my agreement and join them myself. Joseph says there might be another way. He's been consulting with elders from other tribes, learning old ceremonies that might appease the guardians without more sacrifice. But the ceremonies require rare materials and perfect timing, and we're running out of both. I keep my ranger station stocked now, not with first aid supplies and rescue gear, with ash and herbs and carved bones, with the tools of bone speaking, just in case. Sometimes at night I dream I'm already one of them. I dream I'm walking the deep chambers with empty eye sockets, my bones bleached white, my purpose clear and eternal. In those dreams, I'm not afraid anymore. I'm not alone. I'm part of something vast and patient and absolutely sure of its duty. I wake up relieved to still have skin and blood. But I also wake up a little disappointed. The mountain is waiting. The guardians are watching. And somewhere deep below, in a chamber lined with bones arranged in impossible patterns, Marcus Washington stands his eternal watch, protecting what's sacred exactly as he chose. I just hope I don't have to join him. But I'm starting to think I will, because some debts, once made to the dead, can only be paid with bones. My name is Ben Ashwood, and I've been a ranger in the Great Smoky Mountains for 15 years. That's long enough to know every trail, every valley, every twisted oak that grows in these ancient hills. Long enough to know what belongs here and what doesn't. I grew up in these mountains. My grandfather ran moonshine through these hollers back in the day, and my daddy died in a coal mine when I was 12. I became a ranger because I wanted to protect these mountains, to give back to the land that raised me. I thought I knew every secret these hills held. I was wrong. My grandmother used to tell stories about the hollow folk, people who went so deep into the mountains they stopped being people at all. I always figured those were just tales, the kind of scary stories mountain families told to keep nosy outsiders away from their stills and their business. By October 1983, at 41 years old, I thought I'd heard every tall tale these mountains had to offer. Then 5 people went missing near Cataract Falls. It was unseasonably warm that October, 78 degrees when it should have been in the 50s. The hiking group from Atlanta had been gone 4 days. 5 friends, all experienced backpackers, all with good gear and a solid plan. You don't just lose 5 people like that, not in my park. I took Kelly Brightwater with me on the search. She was 26, fresh out of forestry school, eager to prove herself. This was her first major search operation. I remember thinking she reminded me of myself at that age, full of confidence, sure she could handle anything the wilderness threw at her. We started at dawn, following the Cataract Falls trail into the backcountry. The temperature was climbing, but something felt off from the start. It took me a while to figure out what bothered me. Then it hit me. No sounds, no birds, no insects, nothing. In 15 years as a range, I'd never heard the mountains this quiet. The forest is always alive with sound, even in winter. But that morning, the silence pressed against my ears like hands covering them. "You notice how quiet it is?" Kelly asked, her voice dropping to a whisper without meaning to. "Yeah," I said. "I notice." We found their camp around noon, about 6 miles in, set up in a clearing near a creek. My stomach dropped when I saw it. Everything was perfect. Too perfect. The tents stood exactly as they should. No damage, no signs of animals getting into them. Inside, we found their sleeping bags arranged in a perfect circle, all facing inward like the spokes of a wheel. Their food hung properly in bear bags, still fresh, nothing touched. Their boots sat in neat rows outside each tent, but no people, no note, no explanation. "Maybe they went for a day hike?" Kelly suggested, but I could hear the doubt in her voice. "Without their boots?" I pointed to the 5 pairs lined up like soldiers at attention. I tried my radio, nothing but static. thick and buzzing. I checked my GPS, and the numbers kept jumping. 1 second we were at these coordinates, the next we'd moved 3 miles east, then back again. My compass spun lazy circles, the needle refusing to settle. Equipment malfunction, I muttered. But I didn't believe it. All 3 devices, all at once? Kelly was examining the tree line. Ben, come look at this. The rhododendrons grew thick around the clearing, but now that I really looked at them, something was wrong. They formed patterns, geometric shapes that shouldn't exist in nature. Long corridors of open space between the bushes, all pointing the same direction, deeper into the valley. That's not natural, Kelly said quietly. No, I agreed. It's not. We followed the rhododendron corridors because we had no other choice. The missing hikers had to be somewhere, and this was the only lead we had. The corridors led us away from the marked trails, down into a valley that shouldn't exist, at least not according to my maps. That's when we started finding their things. First, a water bottle, set carefully on a flat rock. Then a wallet, placed on a tree stump like someone had arranged it there on purpose. A watch hung from a low branch, swaying gently. None of it looked dropped or lost. It looked displayed. They're leading us somewhere, Kelly said. I know. That's what worries me. The temperature dropped as we went deeper. 20 degrees in less than a quarter mile, from warm October afternoon to cold November evening. I could see my breath, but we hadn't changed elevation. The science didn't make sense. Then I saw the smoke. There, Kelly pointed. Thin wisps rising from somewhere in the valley ahead. There shouldn't be any structures out here. This whole area was cleared when they established the park in the 30s. I pulled out my map again, but the valley we stood in didn't appear on it. As far as the National Park Service was concerned, we were standing in a place that didn't exist. We moved toward the smoke, and that's when I saw the footprints. They were pressed into the mud beside the creek, clear as day. Human-shaped, but wrong. 6 toes on each foot instead of 5, the heel too long, the arch too high. The stride length suggested someone tall, but the depth of the print was too shallow, like whatever made them barely weighed anything. Jesus, Kelly breathed. What is that? I'd seen bear tracks, cougar tracks, every kind of animal track these mountains hold. These weren't animal tracks, but they weren't exactly human either. Could be some family living off the grid, I said, trying to convince myself. Hermits, maybe. Isolation does strange things to people. Could be a deformity, inbreeding, with 6 toes. Kelly looked at me like I'd lost my mind. I'm just saying there's got to be a rational explanation. But I didn't believe it. Not really. We found the cabin just before dark. It sat in a small clearing, built from hand-hewn logs, the style people used around here in the 1930s, but it looked brand new. No rot, no weathering, no moss. It looked like it had been built yesterday, except everything about it was 90 years out of date. Smoke curled from the stone chimney. Through the single window I could see warm firelight dancing. Kelly reached for her radio, but I stopped her. We both knew it wouldn't work anyway. I approached the door slowly, hand on my service weapon. Hello? This is the National Park Service. We're looking for 5 missing hikers. No answer. But I heard something. A shuffling sound, like feet moving across a wooden floor. Multiple feet. All moving at the same time, starting and stopping together. I pushed the door open. The inside was spotless, furnished with simple handmade furniture. A fire burned in the fireplace, embers glowing red and hot. On the table sat a plate of cornbread, steam still rising from it. 3 cups of water, perfectly placed. And carved into the table's surface were symbols I'd never seen before. Not the Cherokee symbols I knew from the park's historical sites, not European either. Something older, something that made my skin crawl just looking at it. Someone was just here, Kelly whispered. Someone's still here, I said, because I could feel it. Eyes on my back, breath on my neck, the weight of being watched. We turned together. Through the back window, I saw them, 3 figures standing at the tree line, maybe 50 yards away. Pale, so pale they almost glowed in the fading light, tall and thin with limbs that seemed too long, proportions that weren't quite right. They stood absolutely still. Not the stillness of a person trying not to move, but the stillness of something that doesn't breathe, doesn't blink, doesn't need to shift its weight or adjust its stance. "We need to go," I said quietly. "Right now." We backed out of the cabin, keeping our eyes on those figures. They didn't move, didn't follow, just watched, with faces I couldn't quite make out in the dimming light. We ran back the way we came, but the rhododendron corridors had changed. They led different directions now, twisted around on themselves. My compass was useless, spinning wildly. The GPS showed us miles from where we should be. Full dark caught us in the valley. Kelly's flashlight beam seemed weak, absorbed by the darkness rather than cutting through it. Every shadow looked like a person. Every sound could have been footsteps. "Ben," Kelly grabbed my arm, "I don't know which way's out." Neither did I. For the first time in 15 years, I was lost in my own park. That's when we heard the voices. Singing, a dozen voices, maybe more, all singing the same song in perfect unison. The language sounded like old Appalachian English, but twisted wrong somehow. The kind of dialect my great-grandmother might have used, but even older. And it was coming from below us, from underground. We found the entrance by accident. Kelly tripped over it in the dark. A hole in the ground, maybe 3 feet across, with crude stone steps leading down. Warm air flowed up from it, carrying smells of earth and smoke and something else. Something sweet and rotten at the same time. "The hikers could be down there," Kelly said. She was right, but every instinct I had screamed at me to run, to get out of this valley and never come back, to forget we'd ever seen those pale figures or heard that singing. But 5 people were missing. That was my job, my responsibility. "Stay close," I said, and started down. The steps were worn smooth, like thousands of feet had walked them over decades. The tunnel opened into a larger passage, maybe 6 feet high, carved through solid rock. Not blasted with dynamite or cut with modern tools, this was hand-carved, patient work that must have taken years. Lanterns hung from iron hooks driven into the walls, burning with a dim, greenish light that made everything look sick and dead. The tunnel branched into a maze of passages, all heading deeper into the mountain. We followed the singing. It led us through a network of caves that shouldn't exist. My maps showed solid mountain here, no known cave systems. But these tunnels went on and on, connecting natural caverns with carved chambers, forming an underground city. We saw them in the side passages, the hollow folk, dozens of them, maybe 100. They watched us pass with eyes that caught the lantern light and reflected it back like animal eyes. Their skin was paper white, their bodies stretched and thin. Some were naked, others wore clothes that looked homemade, stitched from animal hides and plant fibers. Some of them looked almost normal, except for the pale skin and strange proportions. But others were further changed. Bones showing through translucent skin, fingers extended into something like claws, faces elongated until they barely looked human anymore. Children ran through the tunnels, playing games in complete silence. All of them had 6 toes. All of them moved with that same eerie stillness when they stopped, like someone had hit a pause button on their existence. "This isn't real," Kelly whispered. "This can't be real." But it was. It was absolutely real. We found the hikers in a large chamber lit by dozens of those green glowing lanterns. All 5 of them sat cross-legged in a circle, wearing simple white robes, their skin already paler than it should be. They were singing the same song we'd heard above, their voices blending into one. "Thank God!" Kelly started toward them, but I caught her arm. The hikers' eyes were wrong. Pupils too wide, too dark, like they were drinking in the dim light. And when they looked at us, they all turned their heads at exactly the same moment, moving in perfect sync. "Welcome," they said in unison, their voices overlapping into a single sound. "We've been waiting for you." "We're here to take you home," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "We are home. they answered together. The mountain has welcomed us. We are becoming what we were always meant to be, one of them. Them, I recognized him from the missing person photos. A guy named Marcus from Atlanta stood up. His movements were fluid, wrong, like he had too many joints. The surface world is a lie, Ranger. Down here, we remember what humans are supposed to be. Children of the earth, children of stone and darkness. You're suffering from exposure, I said, falling back on training that didn't cover this situation at all. Possible hypothermia. You're not thinking clearly. They all laughed, the same laugh at the same moment. It echoed through the chamber, bouncing off stone walls until it sounded like 1,000 people laughing at once. That's when Kelly screamed. I turned to see them emerging from the tunnel walls themselves. The hollow folk, dozens of them, stepping through solid rock like it was water. They surrounded us in seconds, a ring of pale, elongated bodies and 2 wide eyes. One of them stepped forward, an old woman, or something that used to be a woman. Her skin was almost transparent, showing the slow beat of her heart, the movement of blood through translucent veins. When she smiled, her teeth were filed to points. "The mountain provides," she said in that archaic accent. "You bring fresh blood to strengthen the community. We thank you." "We're not staying," I said, hand on my weapon, knowing it wouldn't help. "Everyone stays," she said. "Eventually. The surface is not for us anymore. We gave up the sun and the wind. We gave up the seasons and the stars. In return, the mountain gave us life eternal in her stone embrace." They closed in, and I saw Kelly's face go pale with terror. She was so young, 26 years old, her whole life ahead of her, and I'd led her down here to be transformed into something hollow and strange. I did the only thing I could think of. I pulled out my flashlight and smashed one of the green lanterns. The liquid inside splashed across the tone floor, and the hollow folk recoiled from it, hissing like snakes. Their skin bubbled where drops touched it, smoking and blistering. "Run!" I grabbed Kelly's arm and we bolted for the tunnel we'd come through. They chased us, dozens of them, moving with impossible speed through the passages. Some ran along the walls and ceiling like gravity meant nothing to them. Others simply vanished into the rock and reappeared ahead of us, forcing us to take different routes, deeper and deeper into the mountain. I lost track of our turns. The tunnels all looked the same. Carved stone, green light, the smell of earth and decay. Kelly was gasping beside me, her breath coming in panicked sobs. We burst into another chamber, larger than the first, and my heart sank. It was full of people, dozens of them at different stages of transformation. Some looked almost normal, newly caught, their skin just starting to pale. Others were halfway changed, their bones lengthening, their eyes adapting to the darkness. And some were nearly complete, barely recognizable as human anymore. They all turned to look at us with those synchronized movements, and they all spoke with one voice. "Welcome home, Rangers. Welcome to the Hollow." The chamber was a conversion room, I realized. Along the walls I could see crude beds, and on each bed lay a person in various stages of change. Some thrashed and screamed, fighting it. Others lay still, their eyes distant and dreaming. And some sat up and smiled at us with teeth that were no longer quite human. In the center of the room stood a pool of water, fed by an underground spring. But the water glowed with that same sick green light as the lanterns. Mushrooms grew around it, huge pale things that pulsed like they had heartbeats. "The mountain's gift," the old woman said, entering behind us with the hollow folk following. "We eat the mushrooms, we drink the water, and slowly, beautifully, we become what we should have always been." Kelly backed up against me, trembling. "Ben, what do we do?" I had no answer. We were surrounded, deep, underground, in a place that shouldn't exist. Even if we fought our way out, I had no idea which direction led to the surface. "When they made the park in 1930, the old woman continued, circling us slowly, they told our families to leave, abandon the homes we'd built, the graves of our ancestors, the land we'd worked for generations. Most people left, but some of us refused." She gestured at the hollow folk around her. We went deeper instead, into caves our grandparents had found, into passages that went down and down into the mountain's heart. And the mountain welcomed us. She fed us, changed us, made us strong enough to survive without the sun. "You're kidnapping people," I said, "transforming them against their will." "We're saving them," she corrected. "The surface world is dying, polluted, destroyed, but down here, we're forever. And we need fresh blood to keep our community strong, new thoughts, new skills. The hikers, they've already told us about computers and satellites and all the wonders of the modern world. Think what you could teach us, Ranger, a man who knows every trail, every valley." I saw Kelly's eyes going distant, unfocused. She swayed on her feet. "Kelly," I shook her. "Stay with me." "It's the mushroom spores," the old woman said. "They're in the air down here, already working on you both. In a few hours you'll understand. You'll want to stay. You'll wonder why you ever lived on the surface at all." I could feel it too, a dreamy softness creeping into my thoughts, a whisper in my head telling me how tired I was, how nice it would be to rest, to drink from that glowing pool and sleep and wake up changed and perfect and hollow. I bit my tongue hard enough to taste blood, using the pain to snap my mind clear. "No," I said. "No, I spent 15 years learning these mountains. I know every rock, every cave system, every fault line and water source." And I looked around the chamber, really looked, seeing it with a ranger's eyes instead of a terrified man's. We were in a natural cavern, but the hollow folk had carved it larger, removed supporting pillars. The ceiling showed stress fractures, places where the weight of the mountain above was too much for the remaining stone. "Ben?" Kelly's voice was dreamy, distant. "I can hear the mountain singing. It's beautiful." The hollow folk were closing in, dozens of them, their pale hands reaching for us. I saw syringes made from hollow bones, filled with glowing liquid. I saw bowls of ground mushrooms. I saw everything they'd used to transform us, to make us hollow. I thought of my grandfather, running moonshine through these mountains, always one step ahead of the law because he knew the land. I thought of my father, who died in a mine collapse when support beams failed. I thought of Kelly, so young, so eager to prove herself. And I made a choice. I pulled out my service pistol and fired 3 shots into the weakest point of the chamber ceiling. The hollow folk shrieked, a sound that didn't come from human throats, high and piercing like metal scraping metal. They rushed at me, but I kept firing, emptying my magazine into the fractures above. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the mountain groaned. Stone cracked with sounds like thunder. Dust poured down. The hollow folk scattered, their unified movement breaking into individual panic. The old woman screamed at them in that ancient dialect trying to restore order, but it was too late. The ceiling came down. I grabbed Kelly and ran, half dragging her through the chaos. Stone crashed around us, huge slabs of mountain falling into the chamber. The hollow folk fled in all directions, vanishing into walls, scrambling through tunnels. Behind us, I heard screams cut short as tons of rocks sealed the conversion chamber. We ran blee, and through the tunnels, following the only thing I could trust, the movement of air. Where air flows, there's an opening. I'd learned that in cave rescue training back when I thought the scariest thing about caves was getting lost in the dark. The hollow folk pursued us, but fewer now. I could hear them in the walls, moving through the rock itself, but the cave-in had damaged something. Their home, their territory, maybe their connection to each other. They no longer moved as one. They were individuals again, confused and angry. We burst into a large passage, and I saw water, an underground river flowing fast through a natural tunnel. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed Kelly and jumped. The water was ice cold and moved like a freight train. It swept us through absolute darkness, through passages so tight I scraped my shoulders on both walls, through drops that felt like falling off cliffs. I held Kelly's hand and prayed the river would take us out instead of drowning us in some sump deep in the mountain's core. My lungs burned. My head went underwater and I couldn't tell which way was up. Kelly's hand slipped from mine and I thrashed in the current, trying to find her, trying to breathe, trying to survive. Then, impossible. Miraculous. Light. The river spat us out into a pool under open sky, stars above, cold October air, the sound of normal wind in normal trees. I pulled myself onto the bank and vomited water. Kelly lay beside me, coughing and gasping. We were both shaking from cold and shock and the after effects of whatever those spores had done to our minds. "Are we out?" Kelly whispered. "Are we really out?" I looked around. We were in a valley I recognized about 3 miles from where we'd started. The river had carried us through the mountain and out the other side. "Yeah," I said, "we're out." But when I looked at Kelly in the starlight, I saw her skin was paler than it should be. And when I looked at my own hands, I saw the same thing. The transformation had started, and I didn't know if it would stop. They found us the next morning, hypothermic and delirious. I tried to tell them about the hollow folk, about the underground city, about the 5 hikers who'd been transformed. But my memory was full of holes. 18 hours missing, just gone from my mind like they'd been cut out with scissors. Kelly was worse. She kept talking about the mountain song and how she needed to go back. They had to restrain her, sedate her. By the time we got to the hospital, her pupils had changed, darker, wider, pulling in light like they were learning to see in darkness. We went back to the valley with a full search team, but we couldn't find the entrance. The river emerged from a narrow crack in the rocks, too small for a person to fit through. The cabin was gone, just an empty clearing with no sign anything had ever been there. The rhododendron corridors had returned to normal, random, and wild like nature intended. The 5 hikers from Atlanta? We found them 3 days later, emerging from the forest on their own. They were pale, confused, their feet torn up from walking barefoot. They couldn't remember anything after setting up camp. Medical tests showed unusual fungal compounds in their bloodstreams, something the doctors had never seen before. But 3 of them recovered, got back to normal, went home to Atlanta with a story about getting lost and a week they couldn't remember. 2 of them didn't come back with us. Marcus and a woman named Sarah walked away from the ranger station one night and headed back into the mountains. We searched for them, but they were gone. Sometimes local people report seeing them, pale figures watching from the tree line, standing too still, moving too smooth. Kelly transferred to a different park after 3 months. Somewhere out west, dry and bright with no caves. She couldn't stand being underground anymore. Even an elevator made her panic. But sometimes I catch her looking at shadows in a way to pose. Hat makes me think she's seeing things I can't see, remembering things I can't remember. They classified the whole incident as voluntary disappearance of adults exercising personal choice to live off-grid. The families sued, but there was no evidence, no proof, just some missing people who came back changed and 2 who chose to stay in the mountains. I kept working the Smokies for another year, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Motion sensor cameras I placed in that valley kept malfunctioning, showing impossible things. Figures moving through solid objects, temperature readings that defied physics, images of structures that vanished when I went to check them. And at night, I dreamed of tunnels, of green light and sweet water, of becoming something smooth and pale and perfect, living forever in stone. I see it in the mirror sometimes, my skin a little paler than it used to be, my eyes adjusting to darkness faster than they should, a softness in my thoughts, a whisper suggesting I go back, go down, go home. I transferred to a desert park in Utah, no caves there, no mountains that can swallow you whole. But even in the bright sun, I feel the pull of the deep places, the call of the hollow. They're still down there, the hollow folk, still transforming surface dwellers who wander too deep, who follow the wrong paths, who listen to the mountain's song. Park Service quietly restricted solo hiking in the Cataract Falls area, but they can't say why. Can't tell people that there are things living under these mountains that used to be human and might not be anymore. I talked to some old-timers in the local communities, bought them drinks, and got them talking. They admitted what everyone suspected. Families have known about the hollow folk for generations, kept the secret to protect them. Because there are people, they said, our kin, who chose the mountain over the modern world. And here's what scares me most. They might have been right. I've read about evolution, about how isolated populations can change fast under pressure, about how humans adapt to their environment. What if the hollow folk aren't monsters? What if they're just the next step? Humans becoming something new, something built for the dark places we left behind? Last week I got a letter. No return address, postmarked from a town near the Smokies. Inside was a photograph of Kelly standing with Marcus and Sarah. All three of them smiling, pale as ghosts, their eyes reflecting the camera flash like animals. On the back, one sentence in Kelly's handwriting. "We're happy here. Come visit." I burned the photo, but I can't burn the memory. Can't stop wondering if she really is happy down there in the hollow. Can't stop thinking about that sweet water, those singing voices, the promise of forever in the mountain's embrace. If you're hiking the deep Smokies and you find yourself in a valley that's not on any map, where the rhododendrons grow in patterns and the temperature drops for no reason, turn around, and don't look back. Because the mountain is always hungry. The hollow folk are always looking for new blood, new knowledge, new people to join them in the dark. And sometimes, late at night, I'm not entirely sure I made the right choice in leaving. Sometimes I think I should go back. Sometimes I think we all should go back, down into the hollow where we came from, down into the dark that birthed us all. But I won't. Not today, maybe not ever. But the invitation is always there, carved in stone, waiting in the deep places. The mountain remembers. The hollow folk remember. And slowly, terribly, so do I. My name is Thomas Silvercloud, and I'm a forest ranger in West Virginia. I've been doing this job for 12 years now, and I thought I'd seen everything these woods could throw at me. Bears, wildcats, the occasional drunk hunter, all part of the routine. But what I found in those old TNT bunkers changed everything I thought I knew about nature. It was November 1966, and I was driving my truck through the state forest near Point Pleasant. The heater barely worked, and my breath fogged up the windshield. Outside, the temperature had dropped to 34 degrees, and a thick fog rolled between the trees like something alive. I grew up on a Cherokee reservation before joining the Army. My grandmother used to tell stories about moth spirits that brought warnings of death. I never believed her. After Korea, I figured I'd seen enough real death to know that monsters weren't real. The scary things in this world were all human. But I was wrong. The call came in around 6 in the evening. Roger Patterson, a farmer whose land bordered the forest, said his cattle were dying. He sounded scared on the phone, which wasn't like Roger. He was a tough old guy who'd lived through worse winters than this. "They're just lying there, Tom," he said. "All of them in a circle around the pond. And there's this powder on them. It glows." I grabbed my gear and headed out. The TNT area, as locals called it, was a leftover from World War II. The government had built over 100 concrete bunkers out here to store explosives. After the war ended, they just abandoned the place. Now the bunkers were crumbling, leaking chemicals into the ground and water. The whole area had a reputation for being cursed. As I drove deeper into the forest, I noticed something strange. There were no sounds. November nights should be full of noise. Owls hunting, deer moving through the brush, late-season insects zing around. But tonight, there was nothing. Just silence and fog. When I reached Roger's farm, he was waiting by his truck, shaking. Not from the cold. "I didn't go near them," he said. "Something ain't right, Tom." We walked together toward the pond. My flashlight cut through the fog, and that's when I saw them. 7 cattle, all dead, arranged in a perfect circle. The formation was too precise to be natural, and covering each animal was a fine dust that shimmered with a faint, greenish glow. What the hell? I knelt down next to the nearest cow. The powder felt like silk against my gloves, and it left phosphorescent streaks where I touched it. I'd studied insects as a hobby for years, knew about bioluminescent bugs, but this was different. This was wrong. My Geiger counter started clicking. "Roger, get back to your house," I said. Lock the doors. I need to call this in. But when I tried my radio, all I got was static. My watch had stopped too. The second hand just trembled at the same spot, like it was afraid to move forward. I decided to check the nearest bunker. Maybe someone had cracked open one of the old chemical drums. Maybe this was just contamination, something explainable. I needed it to be explainable. The concrete structure loomed out of the fog like a giant skull. The door hung open on rusted hinges. I should have waited for backup. I should have left right then. But I'm stubborn, and I wanted answers. Inside, my flashlight beams swept across walls covered in strange patterns. At first, I thought it was graffiti or mold. Then I realized what I was seeing. Wing prints. Hundreds of them, pressed into the concrete dust that coated everything. But these weren't from any normal moth or butterfly. Each wing impression was huge, maybe 3 feet across, and the patterns on them hurt to look at directly, like they were moving even though they were just dusty. Marks on a wall. That's when my flashlight started to dim. Fresh batteries, but the beam faded to almost nothing. In the growing darkness, I saw something that made my blood run cold. There were cocoons attached to the ceiling. Massive cocoons, 4 feet long, made from silk that glowed with the same eerie light as the powder on Roger's cattle. And one of them was moving. I ran out of that bunker so fast, I nearly tripped over my own feet. My heart hammered against my ribs, and for a moment I just stood there in the fog, trying to catch my breath and make sense of what I'd seen. It had to be bats, or maybe some kind of wasp nest. There was a logical explanation. There had to be. I called it in from my truck radio, which suddenly worked fine once I'd left the bunker. The state sent out Dr. Margaret Ironfeather, a chemist who'd been studying the environmental damage from the old munitions. She arrived 2 hours later in a white van loaded with testing equipment. Margaret was 42, Lakota, and probably the smartest person I'd ever met. She wore thick glasses and always had a pencil stuck in her black hair. We'd worked together before on contamination cases, and she never got spooked by anything. "Show me," she said, pulling on rubber gloves. We went back to Roger's pond first. She took samples of the glowing powder, running tests with chemicals from her kit. I watched her face change as she looked at the results. "This shouldn't exist," she muttered. "The compound structure, it's like nothing I've seen. Part industrial chemical, part organic. But the organic component isn't from any known species." "What does that mean?" "It means something is producing this, something that's been exposed to severe chemical contamination and adapted to it, adapted in ways that shouldn't be possible." We headed to the bunker together. Margaret brought a stronger flashlight and a camera. This time I made sure we both had fresh batteries and everything. Didn't matter. As soon as we stepped inside, the lights dimmed again. The camera's flash fired randomly, exposing the foe. "Electromagnetic interference," Margaret said, but she didn't sound convinced. The cocoons were still there, hanging from the ceiling like grotesque party decorations. Margaret approached one carefully, reaching up with a gloved hand to touch the silk. "It's warm," she whispered. Then the cocoon tore open. What crawled out wasn't an insect. It wasn't anything that should exist. It was roughly human-shaped, arms, legs, a torso, but covered in fuzzy scales like a moth's wing. Its face was almost human, but the eyes were too large, pure black, and multifaceted. When it opened its mouth, I saw a coiled proboscis instead of a tongue. It looked at us. Then it screamed. The sound wasn't like anything natural. It hit me in the chest like a physical blow, and suddenly I was seeing things. Visions. A bridge collapsing into dark water. Bodies everywhere. Then a plane spiraling from the sky. A mine cave-in. Disaster after disaster flashing through my mind. I fell to my knees, blood running from my nose. Margaret grabbed my arm, dragging me toward the door. Behind us, the moth person tried to follow, but its new wings were too wet to work properly. It stumbled and fell, making those awful sounds. We made it outside and ran to the van. Margaret's hands shook as she started the engine. "Did you see that?" I gasped. "Did you see what I saw?" "The visions? Yes." She wiped blood from under her nose. "Tom, we need to leave. Now." But we didn't leave. We couldn't. Because standing in the fog between us and the road was something else. Something much bigger. It stood 8 feet tall, and at first glance you might mistake it for a person wearing a costume. But the wings were real. They stretched 10 feet across, covered in patterns that seemed to shift and writhe in the fog. The body was humanoid but wrong, too thin, joints bending at strange angles. And the eyes, God, the eyes, they glowed red like hot coals, and they stared right through me. This was the Moth Prophet. I didn't know its name yet, but somehow I knew what it was. Maybe from the visions it had forced into my head. Maybe from old Cherokee stories I'd tried to forget. It didn't move, just watched us with those burning eyes. "Don't look directly at it," Margaret said, but I couldn't help it. The eyes pulled at me, made me want to see more, understand more. I felt the prophet reaching into my mind, showing me things. I saw the TNT bunkers the way they'd been during the war, busy, full of soldiers and scientists handling deadly explosives. Then I saw them empty, abandoned, the chemicals leaking. I saw moths coming to the area, attracted by the strange smells. I saw them dying by the thousands. But some didn't die. Some changed. The prophet spread its wings wider. The patterns on them formed shapes, buildings, roads, a bridge. Point Pleasant. Then I saw the bridge collapse again. Saw the date. December 15th, 1967. Exactly 1 year and 1 month from now. "It's trying to warn us," I said. "It's trying to contaminate us," Margaret countered. "Tom, those visions, they're not predictions. They're chemical hallucinations caused by the powder. We need to get out of here before we end up like that thing in the cocoon." The prophet stepped closer. With each step, I felt my head grow heavier, my thoughts get foggier. The air around it shimmered with that glowing dust. It was spreading its contamination, trying to change us. Margaret threw the van into reverse and floored it. We crashed through some bushes and found another way around. In the rearview mirror, I watched the prophet watching us go. It didn't chase us. Didn't need to. We were already infected. For 3 days I tried to convince myself it had been a hallucination. The government sent people to seal off the TNT area, calling it a hazardous waste site. They said the bunkers were leaking dangerous chemicals that could cause psychotic episodes. That should have been enough explanation. But the dreams wouldn't stop. Every night, I saw that bridge falling. I saw the date, December 15th, 1967. I saw cars plunging into the icy Ohio River. I heard screaming, and every morning I woke up with a fine coating of that glowing dust on my pillow. Margaret called me on the 4th day. Her voice sounded different, distant. "I've been running tests," she said, "on the dust samples. Tom, the organic component, it's rewriting DNA. Whatever those moths were exposed to, it didn't just mutate them. It made them into something that can consciously direct their own evolution." "Are you okay, Margaret? You sound—" "I need to go back," she interrupted. "I need more samples. I need to understand." "No, Margaret, we barely made it out last time." "It wasn't trying to hurt us, Tom. It was trying to communicate. Don't you see? The visions aren't hallucinations. They're warnings. The prophet is trying to save people." I drove to her lab. She wouldn't answer her door, so I used my key. What I found inside made my stomach drop. The walls were covered in drawings, all depicting the same scenes from my dreams. The bridge collapse, the plane crash, the mine disaster. But these were detailed, precise. Times, dates, locations. Margaret had been documenting every vision, and she'd been changing. Her arms were covered in fine scales. When she turned to look at me, I saw her eyes were starting to darken, the pupils expanding like a moth's compound eyes. "It's beautiful, Tom," she said, smiling. "I can see so clearly now." The prophet showed me. All those disasters, they're connected. The contamination, the industrial chemicals, they're creating weak points in reality. The prophet emerged from one of those weak points. It's trying to prevent others from opening. Margaret, you need medical help. This isn't what? Natural? What's natural anymore? We poisoned the earth, Tom. We filled it with our chemicals and our weapon. And now the earth is responding. It's evolving. And the prophet is trying to guide that evolution, to prevent catastrophes. She moved toward me, and I saw she was covered in that dust. It coated her clothes, her hair, everything. She'd been intentionally exposing herself. Come with me, she said. Back to the bunkers. The prophet wants to meet with you specifically. It chose you, Tom, because you're Cherokee, because you still remember the old stories. You can help translate the visions for people who won't understand. I can't let you go back there. You can't stop me. She was right. When I tried to grab her, she moved with impossible speed. Those scales weren't just for show. They'd made her stronger, faster. She pushed past me and ran out to her van. I followed in my truck. We drove through the forest roads back toward the TNT area. The government barriers were still up, but Margaret crashed right through them. I had no choice but to follow. The sun was setting as we reached the bunkers. In the fading light, I could see dozens of the massive cocoons now, attached to trees and concrete walls. How many people had come here? How many had been transformed? Margaret ran toward the main bunker complex, the largest structure in the area. I chased after her, my lungs burning. Inside, the air was thick with glowing dust. I pulled my shirt over my mouth, but I could already feel it entering my system, making my head swim. The interior was vast, multiple chambers connected by concrete corridors, and everywhere I looked there were more cocoons. Some were torn open, empty. Others still moved with whatever was growing inside. At the center of the main chamber stood the prophet. It was even larger than I remembered, or maybe it had grown. The wings now stretched 15 feet across. In the dim light, I could see its face more clearly. Once it might have been human. Now it was something else entirely. Beautiful in a terrible way. Like a predator evolved to be hypnotic. Margaret walked right up to it without fear. The prophet reached down with one long, thin arm and touched her forehead. She gasped, and more visions flooded out. I could see them reflected in the patterns on the prophet's wings. It wants you to understand, Margaret said, translating. It's not alone. There are others like it, all across Appalachia. Wherever humans left their chemical waste, wherever the ground is poisoned, new prophets are being born. They're trying to warn us, trying to prevent the contamination from spreading further. By turning people into monsters? By showing them the truth. Tom, look. The prophet turned its eyes on me. Red light filled my vision, and suddenly I was seeing everything. Not just the bridge collapse, but the reason for it. Structural failures caused by chemical corrosion from groundwater contamination. The plane crash, caused by mechanical failure from corroded parts. The mine collapse, unstable ground from years of chemical seepage. Every disaster was connected to the same source, human contamination of the environment. The prophet wasn't causing these events. It was trying to prevent them by warning anyone who would listen. But the warnings came at a cost. I looked around at the cocoons, at the transformed humans inside. They weren't monsters by choice. They were victims who'd gotten too close, breathed too much of the dust, spent too long in the prophet's presence. The chemical transformation was irreversible. Margaret, we need to leave, before it's too late for you. It's already too late, she said softly. As I watched, more scales appeared on her neck and face. But it's not too late for you to listen. The bridge, Tom, December 15th, 1967, you have to warn them. You have to make them inspect it before it's too late. The prophet moved closer. I could feel its will pressing against my mind, trying to force more visions into my head. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but my legs wouldn't move. The dust was too, thick now. I was breathing it in with every gasp. Then I remembered my grandmother's stories. The death moth brought warnings, yes, but it also brought a choice. You could accept the vision and be changed forever, or you could reject it and remain blind. I pulled out my lighter, standard ranger equipment, and I remembered another thing my grandmother taught me. Fire cleanses. Fire purifies. I sparked the flame. The lighter's small flame seemed impossibly bright in the dusty darkness. The prophet recoiled, its wings folding protectively. For the first time, I saw something like fear in those red eyes. "Tom, don't!" Margaret shouted. But I'd already understood what my grandmother's stories had been trying to teach me. Moth spirits feared fire not because it could destroy them, but because it could cleanse the chemical contamination they needed to survive. I grabbed a torn piece of cocoon silk from the ground. The material caught fire instantly, burning with a bright green flame that spread across the glowing dust like a wave. The air filled with acrid smoke, but beneath it, I could breathe more clearly. The visions in my head began to fade. The prophet shrieked, that same chest-crushing sound from before, and lunged at me. Its massive form moved with terrifying speed. But it was also trying to protect the cocoons, the transformed humans that depended on the chemical atmosphere to survive. It couldn't attack me without risking them. "Margaret, come on!" I grabbed her arm, pulling her toward the exit. She fought me, her newly strengthened muscles making it a real struggle. "No, you don't understand. The visions are real. We need them." "We don't need this." I gestured at her scaled arms, her darkening eyes. "This isn't evolution, Margaret. It's poison." More silk caught fire. The flames spread to the walls, consuming the dust that coated every surface. The prophet tried to smother the flames with its wings, but that only spread the fire further. Other cocoons began to tear open as the heat and smoke triggered early emergence. More half-transformed people stumbled out, confused and terrified. I saw what was about to happen. The main bunker complex was still full of old chemical drums from the 1940s. If the fire reached them... "Everyone out!" I shouted. "Now!" Some of the transformed people still understood English. They began helping each other toward the exits. Margaret finally stopped fighting me, her scientific mind overriding the prophet's influence as she realized the danger. The prophet stood at the center of the flames, still trying to save its contaminated sanctuary. It gathered the cocoons that hadn't opened yet, clutching them against its body with those two long arms. For a moment, our eyes met, and I felt one final vision force its way into my mind. I saw the prophet's origin. It had been a scientist during the war, working with the explosives stored in these bunkers. There'd been an accident, a chemical spill that should have killed him. Instead, it had started his transformation. Decades alone in these bunkers, slowly changing, eventually becoming something that could survive in the contaminated environment. Something that could see the future consequences of all the poisons humans had unleashed. It wasn't evil, it was desperate. A warning system born from humanity's own carelessness, trying to prevent more disasters like the one that had created it. But its warnings required sacrifice, and I couldn't let it turn more people into what it had become. "I'm sorry," I whispered. Then I ran. Margaret and I made it out just as the first chemical drums exploded. The blast knocked us flat, and fire roared up through the bunker complex like a volcanic eruption. The prophet emerged from the flames, its wings burning, still carrying those cocoons. It flew, toward the forest, trying to save what it could. I watched it disappear into the night sky, a meteor of green fire trailing glowing dust. Behind us, the bunker complex burned. The heat was intense enough that I felt my face blistering even from 100 yards away. Margaret lay beside me, coughing, her scales beginning to crack and peel away. Whatever chemical process had been changing her, the fire's cleansing smoke was reversing it. Other survivors stumbled from the bunkers. Some were only partially transformed, like Margaret. Others had been so changed that I wasn't sure they could ever go back to normal human life. They huddled together in the cold November night, watching their prison burn. "The visions," I said to Margaret. "Were they real?" She looked at me with eyes that were slowly returning to normal. "I don't know. The chemical analysis suggested they were hallucinations triggered by the powder. But Tom, I saw such specific details. Dates, times, names. How could all of that be random?" "The bridge," I said. "December 15th, 1967. If there's even a chance." "Then you have to try." Fire trucks and military vehicles arrived an hour later. The government was not happy about the destruction of their containment zone. They separated all of us, took us to different facilities for decontamination and debriefing. That's what they called it. What they really meant was, we need to make sure you won't talk about what you saw. I spent 2 weeks in a medical facility. They treated my chemical burns and my temporary blindness. They ran test after test on my blood, documenting the contamination levels, and they asked questions, lots of questions. I told them the truth, mostly. I described the transformed people, the cocoons, the contaminated environment, but I left out the visions. Something told me that admitting I'd seen prophecies of future disasters would not improve my situation. When they finally released me, they made me sign papers promising not to discuss the incident with anyone. They classified the entire area as permanently off-limits due to environmental hazards. The official story was that chemical contamination from old munitions had caused mass psychosis among several trespassers. No mention of giant moths, no mention of prophets, no mention of evolution. They let me keep my job, probably because firing me would raise too many questions. But they assigned me to a different district, far from Point Pleasant and the TNT area. They wanted me away from the contaminated zone. It didn't matter. The contamination had already marked me. I still dream about the bridge. Every night I see December 15th, 1967. I see the Silver Bridge connecting Point Pleasant to Ohio, packed with Christmas shoppers and commuters. I see the I-bar joint failing, the structure collapsing, 46 people dying in the freezing river. I've tried to warn them. I've written letters to state officials, to the Bridge Inspection Board, to anyone who might listen. I explained that I'm a forest ranger with concerns about structural integrity near industrial sites. I never mention moths or prophets or visions. Most of my letters go unanswered. The few responses I get politely inform me that the bridge is regularly inspected and perfectly safe. Margaret sends me updates sometimes. She never fully recovered. The scales are gone, but her eyes remain slightly too large, too dark. She can't work as a chemist anymore. Something about the transformation permanently altered her perception of colors and light. But she's documented everything. She's written papers under false names, published them in obscure scientific journals, hoping someone will piece together the truth about what industrial contamination can do to living creatures. The other transformed people have had mixed fates. Some recovered like Margaret, others didn't. I've heard rumors of a support group forming in Charleston, families trying to help their changed loved ones adapt to their new reality. The government compensates them for their silence. But the worst part? The moth prophet survived. I know because I've seen the reports. They try to keep them from me, but I still have friends in the Ranger Service. There have been sightings all across the Ohio River Valley. A massive winged creature with glowing red eyes appearing near factories, chemical plants, anywhere industrial waste has poisoned the ground. Sometimes it's spotted right before a disaster, a fire, a spill, a collapse. People have started calling it Mothman. Other rangers have found more cocoons near contaminated sites. More transformations are happening. Whatever the original prophet started, it's spreading. The combination of industrial chemicals and certain moth species creates the perfect conditions for rapid, directed evolution. We're creating these creatures through our own carelessness. I've developed abilities of my own. Nothing dramatic. Not like Margaret's enhanced strength or the full transformation others underwent. But I dream things before they happen. Small things, usually. I'll dream about where a lost hiker will be found or which section of forest will catch fire that season. My Cherokee grandmother would have called it a gift. I call it a curse, because the big dream never goes away. December 15th, 1967. The Silver Bridge. 46 people. I have 1 year left to try to stop it. Sometimes late at night I wonder if the moth prophet was right. Maybe we need these warnings, no matter the cost. Maybe transforming a few people into monsters is worth it if it saves dozens, hundreds, thousands from the disasters our contamination causes. Or maybe I'm just trying to justify my failure, because I burned down the bunkers, I destroyed the prophet's sanctuary. I chose protecting people from transformation over listening to its warnings. If the bridge collapses next December, those deaths will be on my hands. Last week, I drove out to the blocked-off road leading to the TNT area. The barriers are still there, the warning signs posted every few feet. But in the distance, I could see something glowing between the trees. Green light pulsing gently in the darkness. The moth prophet is rebuilding, creating a new sanctuary, new cocoons, preparing for whatever disasters it sees coming. It knows I'm watching. I can feel its attention on me, even from miles away. And I know, somehow I know, that eventually it will call to me again, because I still carry traces of its dust in my lungs, because I still dream its visions, because I am, in a small way, transformed. My grandmother used to say that once the death moth marks you, you belong to it forever. You become part of its warning system, whether you want to or not. I used to think that was just a story. Now I know better. If you're reading this, if you live anywhere near an old industrial site or abandoned military facility, pay attention to the moths. If you see something too large, moving too intelligently, with eyes that glow in the darkness, don't dismiss it as imagination. It might be trying to warn you about something terrible. And if you see massive wings spread against the night sky or red eyes watching from an abandoned building, remember, the moth prophet isn't trying to hurt you. It's trying to save you from something worse, something we created ourselves.